This is my relationship with the Clone Wars show. Plot, in general, I'll give the plot in the show a 7.8 out of 10. Some episodes are really great, but most of them are okay or good. But the character interaction, I'll give an infinity, something more than infinity out of 10. The character interaction in the show is so good. And one of the weaker things that I find about the show is things that are set up in the prequels that the show has to honor, because they're like, oh yeah, that happened around this timeline, so you should put that in there. For example, the whole Anakin-Padme relationship thing. Because sadly in the prequels are like no chemistry. The thing that gets Padme on is a line about sand. Now here you get some of the romance here. You like still feels a bit rough. But when you have the new characters, especially with the characters of Ahsoka and Anakin, you're like thumbs up. Happy. Because the character interaction in this show is so good. Part of the problem is probably that some of these things that are honored are just there for a second. Like, oh, by the way, I'm here too! Just like one of those winks and nods to the crowd. Like, you remember that? That felt like the first episode. The first episode here didn't exactly feel like it had the most forward momentum for what exactly was going to happen in the show. It took place of basically this kind of corruption thing on Mon Cala, which is Admiral Akbar's planet. And Admiral Akbar is there just like, oh yeah, we need some nostalgia. Yes, we're going to make 3 episodes based on that. Yeah! So it really gives it a hard time in creating its own cohesive story. Like a really hard time. The plot itself isn't that great. It's just a bunch of pew pew pew, but in water. Or the plot itself doesn't exactly carry the most emotion, and at times it does feel like this episode's like, oh yes, we need to stretch out the season until it gets to 22 episodes, so we're just going to end this episode saying, you know what the most hard or important thing is to do? Learn to fight for another day. Oh, thank you. But I guess it was fun-ish to look at, so I'll give it a 6.8 out of 10. Next episode. This one's called Gungan Attack, which is basically all the problems that I have with the first episode, including Jar Jar. So, yeah, basically all the problems that I have with the first episode are still present here. Except I find that this episode had even more of the, oh yes, we need to stretch it out to the 22 episode mark. Like, literally halfway through this episode or something, the main character of this arc is like, yes, go to me is something, and I'll give you an inspirational speech, and you will fight. And it's like, yeah! It's like, and Ahsoka's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to interrupt this because, you know, we still have one more episode. We still have one more episode in this arc, so sorry, you can't do that right now. Like, oh, okay. And this time it's Jar Jar, so there can be quite a bit of an inconsistency between, in general, the drama and the humor. One flaw that is present throughout this arc is the main villain, I think it's called like Tamsin or something, isn't really that intimidating. There's a lot of speaks kind of weirdly and kind of has these frustration things, like it's like a shark. I don't know, I didn't exactly understand it. 6.7 out of 10. Next episode, well, it was better, partially because it kind of finished off this. Same problems that I have here, because here you can just tell that this arc can end any second now, but then they add another plot where like Jar Jar's like captured, so now they have to save Jar Jar. So it could feel a bit generic at times. The only reason I can say it's probably one of the better ones of this arc is, well, at the end, it ends. It's not like, oh, by the way, we have another episode to go. I know I might be kind of harsh here, but sadly I'm the biggest fan of this arc. There's also a big plot twist later in this episode where it turns out the bad guy's the bad guy, and everyone's like, oh! Basically, the prince's father gets killed. Guess who killed his father? Definitely not the bad guy. 6.8 out of 10. Next episode. Same problem that I have with those first few episodes in this arc I have here, which is there's little forward momentum. And this episode revolves heavily around Jar Jar and has one that makes it kind of feel so rushed. Also, as I said, there's little forward momentum, and I'll give it a 6.9 out of 10. Next episode. Same problem that I have with the other episodes in this season so far. I have here the little forward momentum. It feels like season 3. Like season 1 and season 2, you're like, alright, we're on it. Woo, get to war. Here it's like, oh, by the way, we're going to start on the Umbara arc. So, you can skip to Umbara if you want to. But, no, I watched the whole season. So, here, the little forward momentum, partially because this is one of those episodes where we focus mostly around these, like, sidekick droids. It's C-3PO and R2-D2. Like, this felt kind of weird and out of place. There's this weird riddle scene where this person's like, you're in bed, but you don't sleep. I'm like, what? It just doesn't feel like it fits in the show. This isn't much emotion. It could feel like filler. Doesn't exactly move the plot forward. And I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. Next episode. This next episode was probably a bit better. It could feel a bit generic. It could also feel like, oh, by the way, we need to stretch out the season to 22 episodes. So, what's gonna happen? Yes! Another one of the adventures. This time, C-3PO and R2-D2 are gonna free and create democracies. Woo! It just didn't feel like there was much forward momentum. Same problems I have with the previous one I have here. But this one is a bit better because it definitely has a bit more heart. But the main plot of this episode doesn't take place at like 2/3 throughout this episode. The rest is very generic. It's like, it doesn't feel like it exactly have a premise. And I'll give this episode a 6.6 out of 10 just because it's a teeny bit better. This is where things start to get good. Still not. This is in the Umbara arc. This is probably the weakest out of the Umbara arc, partially because it takes quite a while for the episode to get going. I'm pretty sure General Krell looks like Dex from that diner scene in Attack of the Clones. Is it just me? Same species? I don't know. Yeah, it just felt like one of those gym teacher characters. Later in this arc it gets really good, but here it's kind of like, sure, there was quite a bit of heart, but this wasn't as interesting as it is later. I might sound harsh on this episode, but I really do like this episode just compared to the other ones, kind of meh. Here I'll give this episode an 8.6 out of 10. Next episode. This episode was where things in Umbara start to get going. I just thought it could be a teeny bit generic, but then it gets going. You can see, and it humanizes the clones very well. And one thing that I love about this Umbara arc is it isn't about Umbara, it's about Krell and the clones. And that's what I love. And this understands that so well. At times it could still feel like some of the emotional stuff is waiting, because a bit of the starting in this episode could be a bit generic. There's like this whole action set piece. Just needs to get things going. But overall, it's probably better than the first one. I'll give this one an 8.8 out of 10. Next one is even better. One thing that I noticed about this arc is each episode as it progresses gets better than the other. Here it follows that because, all the emotion that's been set up is kind of paid off here. You might be like, whoa, there's still one episode in the arc. This finishes the arc of some of the characters and the Umbara arc. The next episode I would call the Krell arc. The Umbara arc's 3 episodes, but the 4 episodes combined, I would say, is the Krell arc. And that understands that so well. And I'll give this episode a 9 out of 10. Just because it still kind of have a bit of the thing of like, oh yeah, we need this arc to get going. So that's why I didn't give it like a 10. Because at times you can just feel like there's moments where you're like, I see what you're doing there. More episodes. Next episode. This is probably the best in the arc. It's really good. It humanizes the clones really well. It's a really good story. And it has really compelling characters, and it's more characters of a spectacle. And that's what I love. It's probably one of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars. The problem I do have with this episode is I never exactly got why the Umbarans didn't exactly attack the clones ever in this episode. Perhaps they're last episode they're like, oh, let's get out of here. But seeing how the Umbarans just planned attack after attack, at times it could be like, why are they not well, why are they not just attacking? But it's a small flaw, because I do understand that they could be like, oh, okay, they technically won. We retreat, so I'll give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. Next episode. This next episode could feel like a drawback. It's still decent why it was happening. Like, the whole start of this episode was that these two group of colonists get captured. My question is, why did they get captured? Why did they want to that planet? There isn't enough of that for us to understand their goal in this episode. Here it's more like this is their goal. Yeah, here there's not enough to make us understand their goals in the episode or what exactly they plot about. So when stuff happens, you're kind of like, what? So that's my big flaw with this episode. I give it a 7.8 out of 10. So it is better. We get a bit more of the whole reason and backstory and why the Separatists were like, oh, by the way, you're gonna be like slaves on these Zygerian things now. But the big problem they have with this episode is the fact that Anakin's and Ahsoka's plan could at times feel a bit convoluted just to get the plot going, and realistically would be kind of like, And the weird part about this episode is that does happen later in the episode. Basically, the whole plan is they're gonna go undercover with the queen or of the Zygerians to find out where all these slaves are. But I don't think that's the greatest idea, because these queens are heavily protected. They should probably find another way, be knock knock, hey, do you know where they are? I don't know. So the thing that gets a bit annoying is the fact that they do get captured by these slaves. Wow, that was smart. And so the whole episode could feel like, oh, by the way, yeah, we need to create another episode, and that's one of the fundamental flaws that I have with this season. But it was fun. It definitely had some more depth and character than the first one. But just that part that I also didn't like. Another thing that I also didn't like was the queen as a villain wasn't exactly the most intimidating, because some of her plans also made you go, what? Why are you doing this? I understand that before Anakin was revealed as some sort of slave, she'd be like, oh, Annie. But after, I don't think that's a good plan. You have a Jedi who's now you're slave, you're gonna trust this Jedi? To steal a quote from, I think, one of those Marvel movies, not a great plan. But if you think about it, I've probably spent too long talking about the negatives, when actually not the second one isn't a huge thing. It was fun, and I'll give this episode a 7.9 out of 10. This next episode is more character, and it explains Ahsoka as a person, and how she fits in with her people. And that's really like it. Still could feel it. The big problem that I have with this episode is the fact that the queen in this episode wasn't exactly the most intimidating. So when they do something to the queen in this episode, we understand she's not intimidating, so she's out of here. And you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, it was definitely better. It had some compelling characters. Another flaw that it had is the power levels can vary according to what the plot needs to happen. Early, Obi-Wan's being tortured or something, but then once they're like, you know what, time to escape, he's like, yeah! I never understood that exactly. Was that on purpose? We didn't exactly have the most explanation. This arc in total was fine. I just feel like we didn't have enough backstory to spoil it. I'll give this episode a 7.9 out of 10. This episode was decent. At times it could still feel out of place. And this whole plot line with the chemistry between Lux Bonteri and Ahsoka that this episode was about didn't exactly work for me, because I didn't feel like there was enough backstory for Ahsoka to go oh wow, Lux. But I also don't feel like it had the most forward momentum. It's a fun adventure, kind of side adventure, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. But overall, as its own, it was pretty solid. I'll give it a 7.9 out of 10. Next episode. Now, this next episode does something different, which I like. It has Obi-Wan in disguise too, as these bounty hunters who are in prison are about to foil a plan. That's some new stuff, but that's some pretty compelling characters, and it gets to show heroes on both sides. Well, I don't know about heroes, but points on different sides. The big problem that I have in this episode is this major plot convenience, where Obi-Wan just in disguise just happens to make his way to a cell with Cad Bane and that other guy. I forget that guy's name. I was like, wow, which kind of brings this whole plot. So that could muddle this episode quite a bit. And as soon as Rako Hardeen, aka Obi-Wan, arrives, like, you know what, let's escape. Yeah, good plan. I was like, what? But overall, it's decent. So I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Next episode was probably a bit better because we got to see how everyone was dealing with what was happening. Especially Anakin, who we got to see the character of Anakin and how he felt about it very well. The big problem that I have with this episode is it felt like setup. It didn't exactly progress the plot much. It just felt like, could feel like filler. So I'll give this episode an 8 out of 10 as well. Next episode was probably better than the previous one. Just because, you know, it was fun. We got to see same thing, points on both sides. And I like how we spend most of this episode with, like, our villains, which was fun because we got to see points on both sides. And this is a fun episode that really sets the stage. The big problem I have with this episode is setting the stage. Sure, I find it's necessary, but the problem I have with that is I find that there's a lot of stuff that's like, oh, this finale is going to be so great. So it just puts a lot of pressure, and also can feel like we can remove some of the episodes and put a bit more development in one of them. The other flaw that I have in this episode, there's a scene at the start where Dooku's announcing all his like bounty hunters, like, yo, you're the best at this. And I was like, can't we just figure that out when we see them in this like tournament thing? It could feel like setup, but I understand it's necessary. I didn't feel like there need to be a whole episode worth the amount of exposition at the start could make you go, okay, sure. And I'll give this episode an 8.1 out of 10. Next episode was probably the weakest in this arc. Partially, it just felt kind of small scale, like not enough to make this. You see the threat of like the separatists or everything more apparent. Like, Chancellor Palpatine was like pressing these buttons and like these fireworks came on and I was like, yay! I felt like it would have been more impactful. First of all, there was a bigger crowd. Second of all, Palpatine didn't press those buttons to activate those fireworks. Other people would do it, so we can see the lives at stake rather than when this is happening, who are being manipulated by Palpatine because, you know, the clone is just orchestrated by Palpatine. I just felt like that was necessary. It just could make it feel weird, especially when we all know that Palpatine's behind this. It just could feel like this whole arc could feel a bit because here it is. This episode could be quite a bit predictable because you know that Palpatine's all behind this, so it could make these whole episodes feel a bit like filler and create another plot hole and why the Jedi didn't expect that Palpatine will like dark side stuff earlier. Also, so this was probably more predictable. Also, there was quite a bit of exposition at the start just to remind us of things that were like set up in 3 other episodes. You're like, okay, yep, I remember. Yeah, I know. Also, another thing that happened is the problem that this episode was kind of predictable is the fact that, you know, they were like in these like, or kind of transforming into the suits of these, like armor of these, I think it's like Palpatine or Chancellor Protectors. But the problem that I have with that is it kept on showing us who the bounty hunters were and who were not the bounty hunters. Like, it would be like, oh yeah, by the way, that guy's a bounty hunter who's hidden in that Chancellor Protection armor thing. I just felt like it kind of removed all the plot twist element of this episode because you're like, okay, we know. I find it would have been even more shocking if we were constantly reminded of things. And then we're like, oh wait, is that thing happening? Then all of a sudden it's like, but here we're like 1 second after all the exposition, probably not 1 second, we see these people in disguise about to like capture Palpatine or just like, what? So we'll give this episode a 7.8 out of 10. So next episode. This episode sees Ventress, everything that Ventress loves get taken away. The big problem I have with this episode is that. I don't feel like it has enough lead up because we get 3 Night Sister episodes last season, and there's like this huge gap. Then they throw another Night Sister episode, and you just feel like you're like, oh yeah, that is happening, and you're like, what? I just felt like it didn't have enough lead up, partially because there's this huge gap. Country was like, man, I'm bored. What else should we do? Oh yeah, we should probably kill them just because they're having a season ago. Yeah. Okay. I'm like, okay. So the plot itself is kind of just because like there's this long gap because like literally in the whole Night Sisters arc in season 3, the moment literally when Count Dooku kind of expelled Avengers, like, I want revenge. No, Dooku just sitting there like 1 season later. It's like, oh yeah, we should probably get revenge. I just felt like we missed something. I just feel like this didn't exactly afford momentum or progress the plot. But it was fun. It could still at times could be a bit goofy, but it was alright. I'll give this episode a 7.7 out of 10. Next episode was very basic plot, and most of the heart in this episode wasn't exactly introduced to like the second half. But later in the second half, it was better. It was way better because it got to humanize a lot of these characters very well, especially the Ventress, and we got to see points on different sides. But just as the first act kind of dragged, just them on a train with this mysterious box. It wasn't exactly the best. It wasn't a lot of character. The plot seemed very basic, but closer to the second act, it got better. I'll give this episode 8 out of 10. Next episode was decent. It just felt like setup for what's to come next episode. The whole episode, Savage trying to find Maul. At times it could be a bit like in your face, but like Savage is like screaming on like, no, I can't find Maul. You're like, whoa, calm down. And it's just like this. I just feel like this episode's setup for what's to come and to pay off in the next episode. But it was fun. We got to see interesting characters and pretty good world building, and I'll give this episode an 8.1 out of 10. Next episode was probably one of the better ones of the season because it was actually very emotional. It had some very compelling characters, and that's what I loved about this episode. And I loved the connection between Savage and Maul, and I love how that evolved throughout this episode, and that was done very well. It had some very compelling characters. I just find it to be better if Ventress is kind of good-ish now, not exactly like a good guy, but kind of good-ish. I just find it to be more meaningful if Ventress are still bad, or like the assassin of Dooku, and then teams up with Obi-Wan to kill Darth Maul and Savage Opress. It's less meaningful when you see a goodish version of Ventress and Obi-Wan. Wouldn't it be so much better like the episode in season 1 where Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Count Dooku have to work together to escape the pirates? I find that would be better. It could be more meaningful and impactful. Here they just banter, crack jokes. You're like, oh, okay. But overall, this episode was pretty good if you look past that. It's not exactly a huge flaw, just something that I noticed. I'm going to give this episode a 9 out of 10. Overall, this was probably a season that I have to say more about. The flaws were definitely more apparent, but the good were also more apparent. And the season is 7.9 out of 10. Remember, that's just my opinion. My opinion, and the Reddit opinion is just my opinion. Please click like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. Thanks, bye, see you later.